Hey guys, welcome to another Friday video. So over the last few videos we have been checking out the LGA 1356 and also the 2011 motherboards as well as processors and quite an assortment of different RAM modules. So these platforms are really interesting because you can get cheap processors with more than 4 cores as well as very cheap DDR3 registered ECC memory. So it's kind of following what's happening with the consoles. We have 8 cores but fairly low clock speeds, and we can see that in the games coming through. Most games these days are really well optimized to take advantage of multiple cores, and they run beautifully on these machines. So well in fact that a video card like an RX 580 with 8 GB of VRAM will become the bottleneck at 1080p. In this particular video we are going to take a step back and look at the overall picture, and we're gonna compare these two sockets because there's a large supply of old Xeon processors and server RAM. The Chinese companies are building brand new motherboards and they're selling them individually or as bundles. All up, I've been working with 4 different motherboards from China as well as a wide range of processors and all sorts of RAM kits. We will also talk about storage options, and a lot of these motherboards have little quirks, but as long as you're aware of the issues, it's actually not too bad. And it will boil down to the question, price and value. Is going with socket 1356 the better option if you're on a budget, or is it worth spending a little bit more and upgrading to LGA 2011? So on the right side, we've got the LGA 1356 motherboards. These are a little bit cheaper. You can get this model, for example, for around $50, this one for around $50 to $60. On the left side, we've got LGA 2011, and there's a wide range of motherboards. Roughly speaking, around $80. That's where you're starting to get a decent motherboard with quad channel memory, and we will talk about all the memory options and the details later on. This one is a little bit more premium. It's $85 to $90, but it is micro ADX, and that's really the highlight of this motherboard. Both of these platforms use processors from the Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge generation. Sandy Bridge is older, 32 nanometers, built on a larger process, consumes quite a bit more power and generates more heat. On LGA 1356, I recommend you do not go for a Sandy Bridge CPU. There's no VRM cooling, and as we found out in previous videos, the temperatures can become so extreme that the machine will do an emergency shutdown. It sends a signal to the power supply to switch itself off. So on LGA 1356, I recommend you go with Ivy Bridge. These CPUs have a V2 in the model number. If you see a C2, that's just a stepping, they're just trying to trick you. You want a V2 in the model number. They consume quite a bit less power. Also, if you look at the TDP figures that Intel publishes, they are not reliable as an indicator for power consumption and heat. I'm using a power meter at the wall, which tells me exactly how much the entire system consumes. And of course, I'm keeping an eye out on temperatures, and I've got thermal probes and a thermal laser gun, so I can measure exactly how hot the VRM temperatures go. On the LGA 2011 platform, the VRMs do have nice coolers, so here you can get away with using a few selected Sandy Bridge processors. For example, we looked at an E5 2689. That's a really interesting CPU. It's an OM processor. It doesn't exist on Intel's list, so to speak. You won't find any information there. It was built for Dell. And very interesting processor, has 8 cores, 16 threads, and a really high clock speed. Taking a look at these motherboards, we can definitely say that the LGA 2011 motherboards are more attractive. They are spending more time making them look like gaming motherboards, black and green. That's definitely more appealing. These ones look a lot more generic, so that's also a factor that could play a role. In terms of form factor and size, there is a little bit of weirdness going on, so definitely study the pictures carefully. For example, this micro ADX motherboard, we can see the mounting holes. They go all the way to the edges, so this will fit nicely into a motherboard. And then if you want to do clean cable management, all the cables will look neat. Whereas this one is a little bit shorter, so they're trying to save money. This is not full ATX. You can see there's a mounting hole here and over there, but it's not quite long enough to stretch to the mounting holes down here on the motherboard tray, and it's also a little bit not quite long enough in this area. These motherboards, the 1356, similar situation. For example, here the mounting holes, they go all the way to the edge, so that might look a little bit weird in a case, whereas this one has a nice size, so that one should look fairly good in a micro ATX motherboard. But compared to this motherboard, you can see how shorter it is, so it's missing the mounting holes here. So these are considerations if you're into having a neat build with cable management and you care about the fine detail. When you buy such a motherboard, sometimes you get a retail kind of looking box, but often it's just a plain cardboard box, and inside you usually find the motherboard, an I/O shield, and a SATA cable. Some motherboards come with an AMD fan adapter that lets you use various AMD coolers. It's mostly the tower coolers that fit, not the AMD box coolers. They're like a square in shape. They won't fit into the round fan adapter. But tower coolers should work, and also some of those sunflower coolers like Gamma Archer from Deepcool, they should also work just fine. The only motherboard that actually came with drivers was this one here, had a driver disk inside for older operating systems like XP and Windows 7, but if you're installing Windows 10, it will detect all the drivers. There's one driver that I found doesn't get detected with Windows 10, and that's the SATA driver. So I use the Snappy Driver installer, which automatically detects devices and then downloads the appropriate driver. So I use that in such cases, and that worked just fine. All of these motherboards use some variant of an AMI BIOS, and it all kind of looks the same. There are slight differences in overclocking and tuning options. For example, with these 1356 motherboards, the overclocking function for the memory didn't work, so they're all running at 1333, which means you're losing performance. These only have dual channel memory. The platform itself supports triple channel memory, but that's more expensive to implement. So you definitely want to run your RAM at 1600 megahertz, which is the highest that the processors for this platform support. So here you have to modify the BIOS, and I'll put some links down below in the description. It's not that difficult. You just have to follow a guide from a Russian website. Just use Google Translate and you follow the guide, and then you can overclock the RAM to 1600 megahertz. On LGA 2011, both motherboards supported RAM overclocking out of the box. Here we're getting quad channel memory. So here the memory speed is actually not that important. A 1600 megahertz kit in quad channel configuration has a ton of memory bandwidth, the same memory bandwidth as a DDR4 3200 dual channel memory kit. Some of the processors for 2011 support faster memory, specifically 1866. So you can get RAM that is rated at 1866, and that gives you even higher memory bandwidth. Apart from that, the BIOSes have the standard options. For example, you can change the boot order. You can press delete when the machine turns on to access the BIOS. You can press F11 to access the boot menu. That's handy for installing Windows 10. Press 11 and then boot from your USB flash drive. They also support PWM fans for fan controls. Usually the CPU fan can be controlled in terms of speed, but some of the other headers might not work and they just run at the full speed. So that depends a little bit between motherboards. Apart from this motherboard here, this is the cheapest one. All the motherboards have USB 3. So there are two USB 3 ports at the back, and there's also a header here. So you can connect it to your case or get one of those drive bays for additional USB 3 ports. There are also differences with storage. These three motherboards have an M.2 slot, but most of these motherboards will default to PCI Express 2.0, so you will not get quite the full speed for your M.2. The only motherboard that gives me full M.2 speed is this one here. So here it detects the PCI Express 3.0. And on this motherboard, also to save some money, they did not implement M.2, but we're getting a M-SATA port. Now, the other issue is with the SATA ports. the speed is reduced on most of them. These motherboards only have SATA 2 ports, so you're getting around 300, just under 300 megabytes a second in Crystal Disk benchmarks, whereas these ones have a green port, and these run at SATA 3 speed. That one has a single one. This one does have two, but apparently, I got a comment about this. Apparently, this is a bit of a luck of the draw. You should get at least one SATA 3 port, but sometimes you get two depending on what chipset they're using. So they're recycling old chipsets, or maybe they're buying new chipsets, I'm not sure, but you'll find something like an H61 on these motherboards, and here you find like a Q77 or something like that, or a B75, and they're using the chipsets to save money. All the slow stuff, so to speak, is connected to the chipset, like SATA and USB, but all the high performance stuff that matters for the speed, the PCI Express lanes, the memory controller, that is all integrated in the processors. So you're not losing performance in terms of CPU performance and PCI Express lanes, so you don't have to be worried about that. The reason they're using these chipsets is to save money, drive the costs down, and that's a valid strategy. And I haven't had any issues so far with any of these motherboards in terms of features not working, for example. I got a comment to test the sleep mode, and that is actually an issue. I wasn't aware of that when I shot the previous videos. So on most of these boards, the sleep mode doesn't work. So if that's something you are interested in, for example, you're building a NAS or you want to have something on the network that goes into sleep and then you wake it up over Ethernet, that's a feature, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work on most of these motherboards. I've only specifically tested this motherboard. I wasn't aware of the issues on the other one, so I didn't test it, but I will look at that in future videos. Some of these motherboards have an ambient LED just to make it a little bit more attractive. On this one, the strip lights up red. This one also has an ambient LED, but they put the LEDs on the other side of the motherboard and it's not transparent, so it doesn't really work as you expect. With LGA 1356, there are basically just these two motherboard designs floating around, and I would definitely recommend this one. So you're getting M.2 and USB 3, and also the power connectors are in better spots for clean cable management, whereas here it's in a really difficult spot. So the ATX power connector has to go all over the other components. And in terms of price, $50-$60, so there's a price gap of $10 max. So that's why I would recommend this motherboard. With LGA 2011, there's a lot more choice. So Huanan is one brand that is quite dominant on the Chinese market. And then we've got brands like, I don't know if we want to call them clone brands, Plex HD, for example. Looking at the color and everything, they seem to be coming out of the exact same company, factory. So there's probably one company that does all the motherboards, and then they do OEM versions for other brands to sell them off. And there are lots of differences in terms of size, slots, features, but they should all perform very similar, have the same sort of bias and the same sort of quirks, with the M.2 running a little bit slower in that. This motherboard is a favorite of mine because it has so many PCI Express slots. So with the M.2, for example, you can get a PCI Express M.2 card, install it into your motherboard, and you're getting full speed. So this will support PCI Express 3.0 by 4 M.2 cards. This one tops out at around 1500 megabytes per second. So I'm waiting for a faster M.2 drive to arrive to the channel, and then we can do some proper benchmarking. So now we talked about the motherboards, and in terms of pricing, there's a price gap 60 to 80. So we're looking at a price gap of $20 to $30 roughly. And AliExpress, they love playing games with prices, and I often get a comment like, oh, I can't find the prices that you're talking about. So what you need to do is open a clean guest mode in Google Chrome, so there are no cookies left behind. It will hide certain articles if you don't do that. And for some reason lately, if you want to run a search, they make you sign in as well. So that's what I do. I just open a clean Google Chrome tab and then run my searches that way. Now, back to the prices. So between 20 and 30 premium to go for 1356 to 2011. And the question is it worth it? So the motherboards cost a little bit more with 2011, but the processors can be cheaper. For example, if we look at the 2450 V2. That's a $100 processor on this platform, but over here it costs only 75 to 80 US dollars. So the motherboard's a bit more expensive, but the processors are cheaper, and that's because the 2011 was the dominant platform. There are a lot more processors out there. So looking at the prices, in end effect, you're paying similar amounts of money if you buy a motherboard and a processor. And 2011 has quite a few additional features. Firstly, the equivalent processors are usually clocked a little bit higher here. For example, if we look at the 2430 V2 here and the 2630 V2 over there, I believe it runs 100 megahertz faster on this platform. We're also getting quad channel memory, so much higher memory bandwidth, and you will be able to benchmark this in games. There's a noticeable difference going from dual channel to quad channel. Whereas here we're missing out on the triple channel technology that this platform actually supports. So here the best you can have is 1600 megahertz with maybe tight timings. Whereas here you can go all the way to quad channel 1866, and the memory bandwidth is just insane. It keeps up with modern DDR4 dual channel kits. So that's really impressive to see. Also, these motherboards that do appear to be built more robust, you definitely get more features, more ports, more slots, and so on. With 2011, you also get access to a wide range of processors. The range of CPUs on 1356 is fairly limited. There are not too many to choose from. There are some low power chips. There are some high core count processors up to 10 cores. But on 2011, you can go up to 12 cores. And you've got your regular chips like the 2630 V2 or 2650 V2. But then you can also get overclockable chips that are fully unlocked. Specifically, the 1600 series. We've got the 1650 V2, the 1660 V2, and the 1680 V2. Those are unlocked. And if you install these CPUs onto the motherboard, some BIOS options will appear and let you change the CPU multiplier. So on 3056, there's just no CPU overclocking whatsoever. And also on 2011, you have some really good value processors like the E5 2689, 8 cores, Sandy Bridge generation, but very impressive performance. And unfortunately, you don't get any such value processors on 1356. So by talking about the differences and the benefits of the 2011 platform, I believe our recommendation is slowly emerging, and that is to consider the 2011 foremost. Even on a budget, the processors are a little bit cheaper on the 2011 platform, and you're getting higher performance out of the box. So CPUs with the identical specifications will run better on 2011 because of the quad channel memory. Whereas here we are held back by the lack of triple channel memory. And then you get a lot more features, nicer looking motherboards, and benefits like the VRM cooling. So even if you're on a budget, 2011 seems to be the way to go if you want the best value for your money. So let's talk about RAM, and this is where you can save a ton of money. So you can use your existing DDR3 desktop memory, but you can also buy server grade registered ECC memory. So with 1356, you need a dual channel kit. So that will likely end up being either a 16 gig or 32 gigabyte kit. And in terms of prices, you're looking at around $30 for a 16 gig kit and around $60 for a 32 gigabyte kit. Do get the 1600 megahertz version. It is noticeably faster compared to 1333. On the 2011, because we have quad channel memory, this is an opportunity to recycle some of the old RAM that you might have lying around. 4 sticks running at 1333. Because of the quad channel, the bandwidth will get doubled, so that will outperform a 1600 megahertz dual channel kit. And if you don't have any existing RAM, you can also buy registered RAM online. And now let's talk about the sketchiness. You can approach local companies that deal with server hardware, ask them for a good price on a server memory kit. And that's what I did with some of this RAM, but I also bought RAM from AliExpress. So the good news is, buying RAM from AliExpress, the RAM will work at the speed that you paid for, but there's a bit of sketchiness going on. Often they swap out the stickers or they overclock the RAM by reprogramming the SPD, but they seem to be clever enough to do proper testing and validation. So far, all the RAM has been running at the rated speed. I tried to get a refund on one of the RAMs because I took photos and the chips on the PCB are only rated at 1333, but I did not get my money back. So it's very unlikely that you can that you have success with putting in a claim. But like I said, in the end, all the RAM works at the rated speed, so at least that's a fairly good outcome. And now I'm going to give you some specific information. So this is for those who find the amount of stuff overwhelming, and it really is. There's a ton of choice. So let's say you do want to go with 1356 and budget is your number one priority. I would recommend going for this board. So you're looking at around $60. So with the 1356 platform, if you're on an extreme budget, get the 2420 V2, but my recommendation is getting the 2430 V2. It's clocked around 10% higher, and in games that does make a difference. It could be the difference between running at 60 FPS locked or not. There are higher chips like the 2450 V2 and the 2470 V2, but they cost over $100. And at that price point, you're much better off going with the 2011 platform. So basically, 1356 with a cheap 6-core processor and a 16 or 32 gig 1600 megahertz RAM kit is the way to go if you're on an extreme budget. But if you want any better performance, or you can spend $10, $20 more, you should go with LGA 2011. And on 2011, I can also make some specific recommendations. Now, do keep in mind that I've only tested 2 motherboards. So whenever I do a video, I haven't checked out a lot of other options. So it's not me trying to trick you into buying or what we're looking at right now. It's just I haven't looked at other options, and a picture is slowly emerging. So in a way, I'm discovering and unpacking things just with you in at the same pace as we go along. So far, I'm most happy with the Plex HD. Excellent value, $80. You get a ton of slots, and you can get full M.2 speed with an adapter. And there are heaps of processors to choose from. A good starting point is the 2630 V2. 6-core processor will run at 2.9 gigahertz in games. Even better is the 2650 V2. That's an 8-core processor, runs at 3 gigahertz in games. But that one is the price has crept up. It used to be around $60. Now it's around $75 or so. So that processor is a really good all-rounder, and people are talking about it, and that's why the price is slowly creeping up. And if you're into overclocking, get a 1650 V2, 1660 V2, or 1680 V2. These will cost you quite a bit. I do have a 1650 V2. I paid around $100, so not the cheapest processor. So for $100, you have to judge if it's worth it or not, and that's something we will definitely look at in a future video. And if you want the best value processor, that's hand down the 2689. So that's, although it's an older Sandy Bridge generation processor, and I recommend the Ivy Bridge CPUs, these 2011 motherboards can handle that processor. The VRM coolers, they will do a fine job at keeping everything in check, and just go with a tower cooler that has heat pipes, and you will not have any issues with temperature. The processor does consume quite a bit of power, but around $50 to $60, you're getting hands down the best performance, 8 cores, 16 threads, and Ryzen 7 1700 equivalent performance. Also with the cooling, a few recommendations. For 1356, I recommend a top-down cooler to get a bit of airflow onto the VRMs, because they do not have VRM cooling. The Gamma Archer worked really fine. You do not need powerful tower coolers with heat pipes for these processors. The 2420 V2 and 2430 V2, these are really low power energy efficient processors. So the Gamma Archer from Deepcool works fine. It's a $10 cooler, but you will need one of those AMD adapters that most motherboards come with. Or you can get this one. That one uses a backplate and screws onto the backplate. Has a LED fan as well. And I got that one from AliExpress. With 2011, there are lots of options. For the lower powered processor coolers, you can still use a top-down cooler. For example, the Gamma Archer will also work on this motherboard with the AMD fan adapter. But very likely you're going to go for one of the more high-powered processors. Here, all you need to do is to get a tower cooler with heat pipes. This is a model I also picked up from AliExpress or eBay. I will put a link down below in the description. Has a LED fan, and that was enough to cool a 1650 V2 overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz, and the temperatures were fine. And also here, airflow around the VRMs is not that important. We have VRM cooling, and it does actually a pretty good job. Also for 2011, you can use, of course, AIO coolers, and most decent air coolers will have mounting brackets for 2011. And another issue that is mentioned in the comments is security, specifically with Intel processors. And so I've done a lot of research. I watched a lot of videos, and I read a lot of articles about how these flaws work and everything. And it's not that I don't care about privacy. Quite the opposite. I'm a very private person, so I do care about that. But after having read all the information, I believe as a single user playing games and using this at home, the risk is really small. And to round up the video, let's go back to our games. I do get a lot of comments about testing streaming and rendering and so on. It's not what I'm into. Gaming is just my passion. That's what I do. And although we're only looking at gaming benchmarks, I'm sure that other applications are suitable for this project. And I keep saying, if you give me something specific to test, maybe with a link that's really quick and easy, I might actually do it. But if you just say, oh, can you test streaming? I don't even have a clue where to start. Yes. So me having to figure all this stuff out, I'm sorry. Gaming is what I specialize in. Most of the games will run really well on these platforms. It's only unoptimized games, specifically from Ubisoft, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That game needs like a 4.5 to 5 gigahertz processor to run silky smooth. And that's just not going to happen on most of these machines. If you do get an unlocked processor for 2011, then yes, you can overclock it to 4.2 gigahertz, and it will run Assassin's Creed games quite smoothly. But even on the other machines, most games will run perfectly fine. And I think that trend will continue, having a focus on more cores and not on a high clock speed. This might change with the Ryzen 3000 series of processors. Again, there's lots of hype going on. I'm going to wait until reviewers have their hands on the CPUs and do some proper testing. And also, don't discount Intel. It's a huge company. They've got a ton of money. So they're not going to just sit idle on the sidelines. They might drop some prices, and there will definitely be some more products coming. So it's an interesting time. And the next generation of consoles, they will have a higher IPC. So by then, these platforms might become obsolete. But at the moment, I think there's still a few years left of very decent gaming performance. So there you go. Hopefully this makes your decision making a little bit easier. As always, I will put links to some of these products down below in the video description. And going forward, I definitely want to check out the 1650 V2 in terms of overclocking and what sort of performance we can extract out of this CPU. And yeah, more content to come. I'm having at least one more motherboard underway. One of the AliExpress sellers got in touch with me. Not sure how long it's going to take. It'll be a bundle with motherboard, processor and RAM that I believe is very good value. And yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Do leave your comments and thoughts down below in the description. Very eager to hear what you guys are thinking. I will see you next week with our Friday video. Do keep an eye out on Tuesday. Sometimes we have a bonus video. Lately I've been quite busy, to be honest, so there might not be one for a while, but I will do my best. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Give it a like and click on the notification bell. And I shall see you soon with another one.